Hi everyone. So I wanted to take a little bit of time today and go through all the videos you turned in for the bridge project. I'm in the process of grading them, so you probably don't have, well, maybe by the time you're watching this video you have grades. But I wanted to kind of explain to you ways of improving each of these. And then hopefully you can look at that video combined with your grade to see the best way to craft a revision for this project that would help bring your grade up to something that you would be happier with. And frankly, like, the grade is important and all, but the most important thing is helping to bring your skills up to that level, right? So we're going to just kind of go through these one at a time. I'm recording it all in one video because you will benefit from seeing everybody's critique just as much as you'll benefit from seeing yours. So pay attention in some of these others. Maybe you hear a note that you go, oh, I could apply that to mine as well. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll just kind of go through them in alphabetical order. You'll also see, I know a few people turned in some stuff that was incorrectly named. I just went ahead and plopped those into a separate folder in here. So they'll still be archived up there just in case something happens or something. But I believe all of those were the duplicate copies. So we'll start with Alicia. Oh, opened it on the other screen. So I'll kind of give you my first gut reaction when I look at it. The things that I think are working really well in here are the car models. You have some really interesting like waterline here that keeps it looking interesting. And I notice you have some colored light, and you can kind of tell that because you also have some specular on your car here, and it looks like you have maybe like a yellow light or something in here that's kind of giving this a nice feel to it. And some very subtle shadows coming from this direction. Some of the things I think that could be improved is some of the flat colors. Like you have a lot of very solid colors, like this bright red, this green, this dark blue. And I think any nuance in that would really help. So maybe a little bit of transparency, maybe a little bit of like reflectivity on this. You may have some reflectivity in there. I can kind of see a little bit of something, but it's not necessarily coming through that clearly because it doesn't have anything to reflect. So if you notice back here in the background, you have this black background, and so that implies that this is at night, and the lighting in this just doesn't feel like it's at night. So especially with all of the terrain kind of clearly visible. So if you're going for night, think of like the moon being the only source of light. You would have some pretty dark shadows. This feels like maybe sunset with the color you have here. And so, although I know later on we learn kind of how to, well, later on in the next few classes, you'll learn how to put sort of an environment map out here so you can have that. One of the tricks you could do is just to create a giant plane that is a solid color or has a texture on it, and just kind of put that in the background. And so that will allow this background to be a slightly different color. There's also some rendering tricks I could show you as well, but that would help. The other thing is, like, this color of red feels very like it's ubiquitous across the whole thing, and it's a very like that would be a hard color to maintain outside, right? Like it would slowly start to fade or get some wear on it. Like if you painted a bridge this color of red, there would be little rust spots that are showing up, or little worn spots. And so to me, I think I would go with something that's a little less saturated. So you could go with red, but maybe more like a burgundy or something that's a little less rich colored. And I think it would help if some of these elements were not all the same color red. So for example, maybe these posts were slightly different, or maybe the cables here are slightly different. Something that you've probably recognized is you can apply a material just to certain faces. So if you wanted to just select the faces for the vertical cables here, you could apply a different material to that. Anything you could do in terms of texturing would help as well, but I'm not implying that you have to do like extra textures or put grass texture on this. But when we get this very solid color on everything, a lot of times it's hard to tell like it just needs some detail in here. And so you could also consider doing some extra little models, like some rocks in here, or some maybe like a little bit of a sandy area here where it's sort of washed away the grass. All of those little details will be the last little bit that you would sort of push toward in terms of creating the scene. The animation looks pretty good. It kind of when the car passes, it kind of let me see if I can sort of scrub through this. It changes lanes and then it quickly changes back. And it's right here, like it sort of darts forward past the car, but then it kind of feels like it slams on its brakes before turning. And so it's almost like that motion there happens a little too quickly. I think I would probably try to see if you could start it just a touch earlier, and maybe not have it hit and change direction so quickly. Maybe make that a cleaner arc as it swerves in. But if we watch it, you can tell that it kind of feels a little like he rockets forward and then stops as he's passing the blue car. And then that shift sideways is a little bit like, it's almost like the car slides sideways instead of cutting in an arc. So that would be my notes on how to fix the animation or improve the animation. Overall, considering this is your first project in the class, this is some great work. I like the camera work. It's not too much. You could probably maybe reduce a little bit of this camera motion at the very end, but otherwise this is looking really good. So great job. Keep up the hard work. Okay, Ben. So you have a little bit of what I was talking about in Alicia's to help here. You got some variations in the color, and even the subtle difference between this orangey yellow and that yellow on the line is helping keep some texture in here. The water kind of has a when you stretch an image a little too much, you start to see pixelation. And so we can kind of see a little bit of that pixelation in here. But you did what I was talking about in getting some form of background out here. I think I would try to hide this water's edge. Like even if you just had a mountain that kind of goes over here across it, makes it look like it goes around the corner. Just because right now it looks like giant waterfall. Right. The only thing I'd say to be careful with in that background is this right here, hiding that seam of where that is. And one of the ways you could do that is just make a big curved plane in the background. What we'll actually learn later is that there's a way we can create a sky dome light that we can put a texture on, and no matter where I turn my camera, I'll be able to see a background. And it's basically like having your scene inside of a sphere. You could actually do that as well. You could put your scene inside of a giant sphere, but if you did that, it would render everything as black because it would see this as being inside of the shadows of that sphere. So there's some tricks you have to do to make that work. Couple of little things about the environment. I can see where it kind of cuts off there, so maybe extending that on past that. It's anything that sort of breaks the illusion that this is a real environment, right? That in even something that is cartoony, like if you think of the Lego Movie, it still continues the illusion that this is a real world, right? There's never a point where I'm like, oh, I can kind of see the man behind the curtains. I can see how they were making this, or I can see that this isn't all the world that I'm hearing this story from. And so I think anything that you can do with that would help. You got some nice variation in your colors here, and I think that that's coming some from the lighting. And I don't think you've necessarily done a whole lot in texturing on the mountains, but I think that this little change in color here is helping that. So let's watch the animation really quickly. So I think it's looking pretty good. A couple of things to watch out for. You have your car speeds up to pass this car, and it's like an explosion of speed. It doesn't accelerate as much as it feels like something almost knocks it forward. Yours is doing okay on this arcing in. Like I like that. I think that's looking pretty good. But it's really how quick it goes from here to like that fast forward, right? And so maybe ease in just a little bit more on that motion right before it passes it. You also don't have to like line it up to where it's driving. Oh no, yours is doing okay on that. The only other little thing I would say is maybe make your car and these bridge pieces slightly different color, just because there are times where, like right here, like they're overlapping, and just being able to see the silhouette and the shape of that car would help make sure we're able to read it clearly. Kind of getting something similar with this car and the blue water. So just playing around with the color just a little bit might help. So the last little thing I'll say is about the camera. You have some camera moves that feel like, I think that are, so when your camera moves, your entire scene moves, right? Or like your entire scene changes from frame to frame. And what happens is it feels like you have a sharp camera move at the same point that this car starts moving forward. And so it's causing a little bit of a hitch or something there. And so I would say maybe like, and I may be just imagining it, but yeah, I guess maybe it's because the car is moving. But I think I would move the camera just a little less at the beginning, and maybe not be zooming it in quite as much during that part of it. Maybe start from sort of the zoomed in spot of like right here, and not be pushing in, because it feels like I'm kind of, I think it's just a couple of different things happening at the same time that's making it feel like there's a little bit of a hitch in the camera right there. But I kind of like this pan away to seeing how the car drives away. It's really just like right through here that it feels like there's a little bit of too much of everything moving. So overall, great work. Again, keep up the hard work on this. Like again, for your first project, the first time you've ever opened Maya, this is looking great. For everybody, please feel free to submit revisions and using these notes to make it better. So yeah, keep up the good work. Okay, Cody. Okay, let me watch it through a couple times. So my first couple of notes are things that are working pretty well, which is I like how your water is kind of getting these ripples in there. Good job on that. Some interesting things. I think you did some neat things with the models. Like you got this bridge as a way of not having to extend it out forever. You're like, oh, they came out of a bridge or out of a tunnel onto a bridge. And I think that some of your car models are actually looking pretty solid. Like this is interesting what you've done with this one to give it like some extra, Batmobile features. And I noticed you're trying to make the textures on the cars a little more metallic. So I think that's kind of cool. Like, it looks like you've definitely been, and the same with the bridge. You've definitely been playing with the materials, and that's cool. The roadway is glowing. And I think that means you've probably turned up your emission on it. And I think that makes it feel like some form of science fiction scene, but not a lot of the rest of the environment tells any of that story, right? So I think it's an issue of context. Like, is this supposed to be science fiction, or did you accidentally turn up emission to make it seem like the road is glowing? And if it's the second one, then just turn the emission down so it's not like quite as white. But you can even see that it's casting light up onto this pillar and to the underside of the car. So it feels like they're driving on this like light road. And so if that's the case and you wanted that, I think it needs a little bit more other than just the car model to make this seem science fiction-y. Like maybe you got this water, you get this like terrain here, but like maybe you sort of angle it, and in the background we can see a bunch of like very science fiction-y looking skyscrapers, right? I think whatever it is like recognize that a single image can tell a story, and this story is a little bit conflicting, and that like it feels the road feels like science fiction or futuristic, whereas the rest of the environment feels like nature and traditional and like the opposite of technology, right? And so I think you need to be able to show that a little bit. I think you could also probably show it some in the lighting. Think of like if you look up like Blade Runner or some of those other, The Matrix, anything that is like a science fiction story. Like right now, most of your lighting feels very white and there's not a lot of color to it. And I think you could probably play with the color, maybe some blue lighting, maybe some blues with some red highlights or something to get a very noir look or futuristic look. So play around with those things. In terms of the animation, let's watch that really quick. So in both the camera and the car, it doesn't feel like you're breaking those tangents at the beginning. So if you watch this car and this car, it feels like they're stopped at the beginning and then they slowly start moving forward. So if you go back and watch some of the videos, you'll see where I talk about breaking those tangents. And it feels like that with this one particularly, it's moving kind of slow at first, and then it feels like it gets a rocket boost right here that blasts it forward. It's also just a touch disorienting because your camera starts moving quickly at that point too, right? And so it feels like two different scenes. It feels like at first it's like a serene drive through the country, and then suddenly like we're fast paced, right? And I think it needs to be cleaned up a little bit that shows the difference, or shows less of a drastic change there. So again, I think you've obviously for your first project you've figured out a lot about this program. It seems to me, just making observations, it seems to me like you've really dived pretty deeply into playing with the materials. And if that's something you're enjoying, like just kind of acknowledge that and consider if that's a part of this that you're liking, or is it the animation part you're liking the most? Whatever it is, like just keep working on that and building those skills. So cool. Keep up the good work. Let's move on here. Okay, Kendrick Tate or Tate Kendrick? No, Kendrick Tate. Yeah. Let's check yours out. Okay. So, some of my observations here. I think again, like kind of some of the colors are a little bit ubiquitous. Like you get this green color, this blue color, this sort of grayish color on the road. I think mixing some of that up, even if like you have a slightly darker gray on the pillars than you do on the road. Like just mixing some of that up will really help get some variety in here, make it feel less like computer generated. The other little thing to notice is like the road ends. So apparently like they're getting ready to go off road here. And so like that just kind of breaks the illusion a little bit. You can usually fix that with some camera work or with just extending the road out a little further. It looks like it kind of goes into the ground there, so you may need to pull some of those vertices down if that's what you're doing. It looks like you've rendered with Viewport 2.0. You're getting a little bit of a gap in between this, and I would have to open up Maya to remember what that's called. But it's under your shadow map, and trying to pull that back a little closer will help. So your shadows are also just a little bit like jagged, so turning up your resolution, just playing around with that a little bit. They're very strong from one direction, which makes it feel like the sun is like maybe in the process of setting or like close to the end of the day. But even though that's the case, the lighting is very white, and so I think getting a little bit of color in your lighting maybe will help, or maybe just raise your light up a little bit to where the shadows aren't quite as long and tall. I like what you're getting in these shapes, but then when it comes to the color of it, it feels very stark. So you have to play around with Viewport 2.0 just a little bit more to get a good render than you do with Arnold. So I'd say keep pushing this a little bit, maybe soften some of these shadows. Maybe instead of using just this one light to project, maybe you turn down the brightness of that light and put several lights in here to kind of get a softer shadows in places. So the thing I was mentioning, let's see if I create a light, directional light. I think it's under this shadows, use depth map shadows. I think it may be the bias, that if you pull that away, your shadows get kind of off. Let me put it in here and we'll test it. Pull this up. Plane. A cylinder. And then we'll do 6. Okay, we got that. Turn on my shadows, ambient occlusion. Yeah, so we're getting some. There we go. Getting that shadows, but if we turn up this bias, it starts moving away from our base. And so make sure that bias is pretty low. And then the jaggedness you're getting here is about turning up this shadow map resolution. Sometimes if you turn up the filter size a little bit too, that'll also like soften the edge of the shadows just a little bit. And you can play around with it. I don't know what, sorry, I'm just testing some of these out to see what we get. You can play around with it just a little bit and try turning on this. Does it use autofocus? Yeah. So I don't know if you can tell it on mine, but when I turn off this use autofocus, I get a little bit of a softer shadow. So it really, like, there's some different settings you can play around with here to try to soften those shadows and get them a little nicer. And then again, if we added just a little bit of color to this, like not much, but just a little bit, right, versus a second light, and so we can use any type we want to. I'll just duplicate this, turn it in this direction, move it over here. I'll go ahead and turn off the shadows on it so it's not casting shadows. And maybe instead of red, I would do blue, and then just turn that intensity down just a little bit more. And so we're starting to get a lot more nuanced lighting in here. So I think it just needs a little bit of something like that to pull this together, because right now it's very simple on the lighting, and I think it's kind of hurting it. I do think your models are interesting. You got this little fan on the back, and you can tell that you put a little extra work into all that. In terms of the animation, I think the animation could still use another pass. So, like, it feels very segmented. Like the car drives forward and stops, and then like each action doesn't feel like it's overlapping the other. It's like there's the pull forward to the back of the car, pull sideways over to the next lane, pull forward in front of the car, pull sideways over into the next lane, pull forward, and like that just needs to feel like all like one kind of simple motion, even if it slows down here just a little bit and then speeds up. Right now it just feels like I can see the keyframes a little too clearly, and sometimes that's just softening some stuff in the graph editor. Sometimes it's you need a couple more keyframes to smooth it out. Sometimes you need to stretch some keyframes apart because you have them happening, like if you have a keyframe on frame 10 but then you have another one on frame 12, and then another one on 13, like that's a lot of keyframes, and maybe we're able to see the like stop and start a little too clearly. And so sometimes you just have to smooth those out, stretch them out a little bit, or just again, the graph editor is going to help you a lot on it. I would probably work on the timing first and then go into the graph editor to try to work with smoothing that out. So again, I like the subtle camera motion. And I think that really helps. Again, just keep pushing on it. Like this, I like to say, you're never finished. You just run out of time. Well, since you can turn in a revision, you have a lot more time, and so you can keep doing revisions on this to continue to improve it. So cool. Keep up the hard work. Michaela. So, just kind of, you got a lot of shots in this one. So some of the things I'll point out that I think are working really good. It seems like you're really enjoying the modeling part. You've done a lot in the airship and the actual ship, the terrain. You get this nice bridge. And I think you have your water looking pretty good for this environment as well. That looks like you may be using Maya water, or I'm sorry, the Maya water material along with the boss to get the ripples on the shore there. This probably won't render with Arnold, but it looks pretty good in this Viewport 2.0. The couple of things that I think are really kind of missing on this is the sort of a little bit more material work on like the ship, and I think it's very noticeable that that it's inside of a box. So once we get rendering it, like you can see like these seams that happen here and here, and so I think that was a good effort, but I think you kind of have to sort of control that just a little bit more. And it's probably going to be hard to hide that if you move your camera too much. So I think the one of the other elements to me that's kind of makes it a little bit makes you a little bit dizzy watching it is that the camera just moves so much. Like we're kind of swinging all over the place, and like you have a lot of keyframes on moving the camera. And so it gets very tempting to do that inside of Maya because you can move your camera anywhere you want to. But realize that what we see in camera motion is sort of a language that we've developed over time and we understand that language because we've been watching movies. So if you watch movies all the time, the camera moves you see are limited to what somebody could actually do with a camera. And so this, like, I'm down here on the water and I'm up in the air, and then this next one, like we're on the water and we fly up to here. Like that would have to be like a helicopter or a drone shot, and it moves too fast and too sharp to feel correct. So I think that like, to be able to pull off a shot like that, like this third shot you have where we're kind of down on the water, we pull up here, and then we follow the cars. Like that shot would be like 15 to 30 seconds long, and you're pulling it off really quick, and so it feels too sharp. And so I think I would just reduce some of the camera motion. The other thing is when the camera is moving really fast, it's kind of hard for us to actually take in any of the hard work you've done, right? Like I kind of want to look at this ship, but the ship's moving really fast and the camera's moving really fast, and I'm kind of having to chase it, right? The same goes with the cars. I can't really ever see the cars because the camera's always moving. Right? Like my closest glimpse is like right there as that one passes by. And so sometimes too much camera motion can actually hide the work instead of show it off better. So I would pull back on that a little bit and just try to come up with some simpler camera solutions. I like that you did multiple cuts. I think that's kind of neat though. And you did way more in terms of like length than was necessary, but I think you were definitely playing with that. Now I think sort of tone it back a little bit so you can use it to communicate what you're going for. A couple of things in the materials. I feel like all the materials are pretty flat colors again. I think that that's really amplified by the fact that there's no shadows in here. So if it looks like you're using Hardware 2.0, again, to get shadows, you have to click that button right there. Otherwise, nothing casts a shadow. There's other ways of turning it on as well under Renderer, Viewport 2.0. I think there's a place in here for... Is it in here for shadowing? Anyway, I'd have to dig around through here. But that's a really easy way, just like turn on your shadows, right? Also, you can turn on your anti-aliasing here. You can turn on motion blur. So pretty much like for this to render correctly, everything from this little checkerboard object over to this little jagged thing has to be turned on. And it looks like maybe you haven't turned on the lighting and the shadows. I don't know if you had textures or not, or the ambient occlusion. And so you're getting some very flat looking scenes. I think just turning all of that stuff on, this is probably going to start to look better, but there's no real information about the lighting in these scenes. Like I can't tell the direction the light is coming from, or like, it doesn't really, it seems like it's just kind of a flat color. So lighting is something I would definitely work on, and I think the motion is something I would work on all these objects. So again, like in animation, or in this class at least, we cover a lot of different topics, and I think it's one of the benefits of that is you get to see the things that you enjoy doing. And just my observation is it seems like you're really enjoying the modeling, like you're creating all these extra models. That's cool. Like, keep pursuing that. Just don't let it take up too much of the time and then not give you enough time to work on the other elements. But that's something to just make note of. If you enjoyed modeling these things, that's cool. See if you enjoy modeling more on the next project and the next project. And if the answer is yes every time, then maybe you found what it is you want to do. If it's like, no, you just really wanted to model just to get this specific scene, and what you like is some other element to it, all of that's going to inform decisions you have to make later about picking a concentration and sort of picking a goal for your career. So just be acknowledging the things that you like, and it's fine to acknowledge the things you don't like. If you're like, I don't like making stuff move in this, I just like creating the things, then you know that maybe animation is not the concentration that is going to be best to pick, but maybe one where you get more opportunity to model, or whatever it is you like. So again, keep up the hard work. Let me know if you have any questions, and let's go ahead and watch Marin's, and then this video is getting a little long. I'll probably stop it and break it up into 2 videos. That way it's not like a giant 1-hour video. So Marin. Actually, some of the notes I just talked about, I think we're seeing some of those in here, except for I think you've really got some interesting lighting going on here. It feels a little bright and a little white, so maybe just a touch of color in there. It looks like there's a chance what you've done is put a sky dome light out here, because I see this like white peeking out through here. And that works really good just to get a little bit of lighting everywhere. But a lot of times, like if you think about it, like our sky isn't evenly lit. Like usually the sun is in one location and it's the brightest point, and that's the source of most of the light. And then we're getting a lot of bounce light from the blues and or whatever color is in the sunset that is bringing some color to the scene. And if we use the sky dome, we're just getting bright white. And although that works to get some pretty neat ambient occlusion going on in here, I think it needs just a touch more work on the lighting. But like I like the feel to it. You're using these like softer greens, these softer blues, and it doesn't feel quite as primary colors. Like like you're using some more nuanced colors. I really like this like long bridge. Like I think that's kind of a neat element, and you've made it really tall. And so that like kind of tells us something about the scene just from the beginning. You also have some neat stuff going on with like the way the water sort of curves around here. I can kind of see the edge of it there, but that's not really that big of a deal. My biggest notes are going to be on the motion and the camera. To me, I think the cars move a little fast right through there. Like it feels like the keyframes are kind of jumbled together. And maybe just take another pass on kind of cleaning some of those up. It's like certain cars have to stop before the other one can get around it, and it happens really quick. So maybe stretch some of that out on your timeline to give you some more smoother transitions, and a little work in the graph editor. I think the other thing I would say is like from this first shot, we're seeing it from like half a mile away. So I can't really tell any details about the models, and you're also just showing us a lot of empty space up here and here, I think it would be a little bit more interesting if you just had some stuff sprinkled in here to add appeal. But I also think it would be interesting to sort of get in here to where we can see the action happening. Again, when we talk about fast camera motions, like what sort of helicopter or drone could fly in that quickly. And so when we watch that, it feels like unrealistic. But what you could do is you could start this off, if you're wanting to have it this far away, just to show us this like enormous bridge scene, or you could even show us like what you have at the end kind of does that as well. Well, I'm gonna let it play through to the end. Like somewhere in here, like some of this shot shows that as well. You could do a camera cut. You could render from two different cameras. So maybe you have a slow camera motion at the beginning from kind of like this angle to where you just give us, it's called an establishing shot, where you establish the scene so we can see, oh, it's a giant bridge in these green hills with this water. And then you could cut to a different camera, and it could be in here closer where we're seeing the action with a little bit more of a subtle camera motion. And you can have multiple camera cuts. The way you do that is you set up different cameras on your timeline, right? And maybe what you would have to do is different render passes, where you would say something like, you're going to render frames 1 through 100 from camera A, and then from frames 101 to 300 from camera B, right? And so that's how you would set that up, and then you'd have two different folders with different sequences of images in them, and you would put those into Premiere or OpenShot and edit those together. So I think that's the biggest thing, is like, it looks like there's some good stuff going on here, but the camera's a little too far away and moving a little too fast for us to actually be able to read it too clearly. That's a really small thing, but it also looks like there's like a plane right there in the center of the road. And so that's another thing to just, little detail stuff. So I think my note would be, sort of simplify the cameras, clean up the motion a little bit, and then if you have a little bit of time to sort of sprinkle some more information in these hills so it's not quite as solid colored, I think that would help. So cool. Again, keep up the hard work. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. That means we'll have a couple of videos that are about 30-35 minutes each. And I'll pick it back up with Nathan when we get back on the next video. So cool. Thanks. Bye.